Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our today's session, MiCA in Action, Lessons from Europe's first licensed crypto companies. And we are super excited to be here with Marcus from Januar. We are co-organizing this event because we saw that this is a super hot topic. My name is Carola Kassai, and I'm the founder and CEO of KassaiLaw, who are the first ever completely virtual interdisciplinary law firm in the EU, actually specializing in tech since 2012. And we work a lot with MiCA as well, just like Januar, Marcus. And we know everything from the market sentiment, basically, in the last years, and a lot of excitement and the 10,000 question marks. And now the time has come that you guys, Nelly and Ian, you've done it. This is amazing and very intimidating, maybe for some as well. So it's a very, very great pleasure to have you here, and a great, great welcome. So Nelly from ZBD and Ian from Moonplay, please introduce yourself for a second to the audience.
Nice. Thank you, Carola, for having us as well. Very happy to be able to share some of those experiences from the licensing process. My name is Nelly Dudina-Populi. I'm the Head of Risk and Compliance for ZBD EU, and I am based in the Netherlands.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. Owen Kearns, Head of Compliance, Head of AML, MLRO for MiCA Europe. Like Nelly, I'm based in the Netherlands as well to facilitate the MiCA compliant framework of MiCA as we spread across the business, and really delighted to be joined with Marcus and Carola this morning to discuss all things MiCA.
Thank you very much that you joined us. And Marcus, do you also want to say some words?
Yeah, I would like to. My name is Marcus Mølleskov. I'm the Chief Risk and Compliance Officer at Januar. And we don't have a MiCA license yet. We're in the process. We sent our application just before New Year's, and we are going along well in that process. But we do have a payment institution license, which we've had for almost 2 years now. So we have gone through other financial licenses applications in the past. So we have experience from that as well.
Thank you. So let's jump in, because I believe there are tons of very practical questions. But let's just start with the basic one, like, how does it feel, guys? You've done it.
Well, I think I've told everyone, I think it was one day of elation when we received the letter, confirmation that it's all over, and then thereafter, extreme amount of preparation and diligence in ensuring that we operationalize essentially our commitments that we provided to the regulator, and ensuring that we're monitoring those to ensure that they've been done rightly and that they maintain that standard. So I'd say there's one good day in the whole process is when you get the letter, and thereafter it's another day at the office and ensuring that essentially you can walk the walk, having talked the talk for so long.
Yeah, I agree with Ian. I think we had a similar situation. It was definitely the biggest team celebration that we have had, because this was really a cross-team effort as well. So everybody was extremely happy the day that we received the confirmation and we could say that we're now licensed. But immediately after, maybe even the same day, we already started thinking about, okay, now this is done. The next stage begins, and that's even more exciting and requires a completely different type of effort to prepare everything and make sure that we can go operational and go live under MiCA.
Yeah, that's also a very, very important part, actually, of the whole being licensed live. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that later on. But first, I would like to ask, because you mentioned that it was like enormous preparation. It's an enormous team effort from like basically everyone. So how did your process look like? And also considering the takeaways and learning. So like how would you do it a bit differently now, maybe afterwards?
That's a great question. So I think for ZBD, the process started a while back. We already started the preparations in 2023. A little bit similar to Januar, ZBD also submitted an EMI license application with DMB before its MiCA licensing. So already during that time when we were preparing the EMI license application, we tried to keep MiCA on the back of our minds. Of course, none of the RTSs and the guidances were final yet, but still we started doing our homework early on, make sure that we design processes which are compatible with MiCA requirements as well. And I think that helped a lot when we truly entered the MiCA licensing process, because there's a lot of governance and broader documentation that is required under MiCA that maybe for vast companies would be a bit surprising. So for us, the EMI documentation and policies framework really helped as well.
And then you started basically in 23, and how did it look like from there?
Well, 2023 was indeed more background homework and EMI focused. And in 2024, when the AFM, the regulator in the Netherlands, opened the pre-scam procedures in February, we also made sure to join that so that we can submit our business model, we can submit our ideas, basically an assessment to the AFM for them to pre-review what MiCA services we're intending to apply. Does that really fit? How does the framework work? Which was also very helpful because they gave us some preliminary feedback and shared their views and process for the actual license application. So as soon as that opened in April, we made sure to submit the full license application. So I think February to April was a very intense period to make sure that all documents get finalized. The application form itself is very comprehensive. And of course, we also know from other financial licenses, it's always better to give a little bit more as well. Don't try to just answer the questions, but look how everything really fits together. And this was also the expectation of the AFM. So I think that was the first most intense process sort of period. And Ian probably has the same experience. The AFM really also showed on their promise. They were very proactive. They were very fast in reviewing the documentation, in keeping their deadlines, and coming back with follow-up questions and clarification requests.
Oh, very much so.
Sorry, just one final part of their process is that then you got the license at the end of last year, right?
Correct. Yes, on the 30th of December when MiCA
okay, just in time.
Just before New Year's.
What a great present. So then indeed it took basically from April up until almost January. Okay, thank you very much, Nelly. Yes, Ian.
Yeah, very similar. I would add, though, that, and maybe this won't apply to most of our listeners, but in the 2023 stage, MiPA did conduct a jurisdictional analysis on which regulator, how MiCA would be applied, what a grandfathering period would look like. So in the Netherlands, there was a 6-month grandfathering period. Marcus, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Denmark had an 18-month grandfathering period. Ireland at the time was holding to 1 year. So we had to decide which jurisdiction would suit us. MiPA, we operate in very much a startup mentality. With a startup mentality that works for some regulators, may be different for others, depending on what they look for. Ultimately, we decided to go with the Netherlands. So essentially, we were working with a deadline in mind, as I'm sure all listeners are at the moment. So we figured that we would have to get the application in by April, with the aim of completing it in December. Practical preparations included essentially a gap analysis, what MiCA was asking us for, and what was different than what we already had. I believe all crypto businesses in Europe would have been operating under a VASP license primarily AML focused. Now we had additional elements to include, from market abuse, conflicts of interest, regulatory capital requirements. We had to piece all those together, and the final sort of piece there is communication with senior management. Having heard from compliance for so long that the compliance equals AML, we now have to go to an environment where compliance doesn't always equal AML, and we have to explain why you would have to hold a certain amount of funds for a capital requirement, why you would have to identify your conflicts of interest, why that's important. Also, why the regulator is asking for this in the first place, like what risk are they trying to mitigate, and essentially bringing the business on board. And of course, it's a bit of carrot and stick. All the requirements, you could consider it's a stick, but there is a carrot at the end as well, expressing the senior management that access to the European market, largest market in the world, the ability to integrate, expand, advertise, set up local payment infrastructures in all 30 EEA states is a huge benefit to the business. And there is a competitive advantage to MiCA. So for us, that was important to stress, essentially from day one.
That's very, very interesting what you say. So you basically had to do like an internal process as well to outline and convince why it's important for the business.
Of course. I mean, it speaks to the wider cross department, cross operational engagement that Nelly was referring to. Again, going from that mindset of a VASP where compliance equals AML, you can be very siloed in, it's going to be onboarding, it's going to be transaction monitoring, it's going to be an MLRO reporting suspicious activity. Now you're going to have to engage, much wider parts of the business, anywhere from comms, the engineers that sit over the website, senior management, what their expectations should be in terms of training, in terms of the information that they receive. It includes basically all parts of the business. They have to be attuned to understanding not only what we're doing, but why we're doing it, and why it's a benefit for the business.
And when you mentioned that you did your forum shopping, because that's also very, very common. So we get also a new request basically every week to help the companies to do the forum shopping. So to pick the right jurisdiction, where should I submit the license? Because MiCA is a regulation, but I've heard that certain authorities are a bit more maybe flexible or have a bit better understanding and so on. So do you have any advice when you've done this as well, obviously coming from the US? So okay, which country to choose? And then you ended up in Netherlands, but what would be like your basic or major advice to companies coming to the EU or doing forum shopping?
Of course. I mean, on a theoretical level, this is a regulation, not a directive. Oh, yeah. It's not going to be transposed. It's all supposed to be an equal playing field in terms of application times and reviews. But we wanted to get in a bit deeper. When we say shopping, it's more for us. It's a gap analysis. We looked at the regulator's reputation was forefront of our decision making process. We're coming from Ireland. The Irish regulator, great reputation. Equally in the Netherlands, great reputation. That's important for us. We looked at potential response times. We looked at how the regulator views crypto as an industry. Again, there's a balance there to be considered. We also looked at practical internal matters. MoonPay, for example, has already a substantial presence in the Netherlands. We take from the talent pool here a lot of our engineers, a lot of other resource. So we were not starting from scratch, and we made that apparent to the regulator that this is not. We didn't want to say we were shopping. We wanted to say we were doing what's best for us, essentially. So we took all those matters into consideration, and we decided that going forward with the Netherlands was the best option.
Thank you. And Nelly, what surprised you the most in the whole preparation process?
Well, I think once you start diving into MiCA, there are certain provisions which, on the face of it, when you look at them, you think, okay, this all sounds logical, it's all familiar. But once you start going into the depth and you try to apply it to your business, you actually think, wait a minute, how can I actually practically implement this? And I guess this is kind of expected as well, as MiCA is a brand new regulation, so we don't have yet too many examples or too many case studies, right? When we started applying, we had none actually. So we really had to look at interpreting everything ourselves, aligning with the regulators, making sure that they agree with our interpretation and that it's both compliant and it makes sense for the business. So I think for us, it was quite a creative exercise, even from a legal and compliance perspective. So for some people, I think that's quite exciting. For me, it was to really try to look and apply everything, to ZBD.
I agree. Yes, that's basically the core of our job as well at KassaiLaw, that we have to be very creative with these very new technologies and regulations and so on. And I also enjoy it a lot. So I can relate to what you say. And Ian, what was your biggest surprise?
I mean, on a practical level, I think the timelines were quite surprising to me, and how strictly they're being adhered to by the regulators. Again, coming from a vast world where there was no such timeline. You could file an application, you could hear back in a week, you could hear back in 3 months, and then from there you were given somewhat arbitrary response times based on the based on what the regulators said. Now with MiCA, I don't know them specifically, but it's something like you submit the application, you've got a 20-day completeness assessment. I think you have a 40-day review period, and then thereafter it's 5 days to make a decision. Now, of course, there's some creative stopwatching going on. That's to be expected. But a surprise for me was when we submitted the application, we received a prompt response, a prompt and detailed response, and then a tight deadline thereafter to complete that response, to the satisfaction of the regulator. So I think that's something that's being adhered to quite strictly. So that change in dynamic, where you are running a stopwatch, where you are having to adhere to a deadline both for the business and the regulator, I found that surprising. In addition, I think when you look at the text of MiCA, and as Nelly has alluded to, we do have there's a voluminous MiCA text, and then it was accompanied by various regulatory technical standards. So you did find yourself in the process of developing, documenting anything from a conflicts of interest policy framework, and then that would be complemented by a regulatory technical standard. And although it didn't say something different most times, it did provide more detail, more expectation of what should be in your framework, and then having to revisit that to then go in and change it up slightly. And again, communication being key. Having to explain that we need something a bit different this time round because we've had more text, and on that went. So I did find that a challenge to keep up with. That said, I think the regulatory engagement was quite understanding. We were never called out for having gaps in a process or gaps in a policy document, based on the timelines for publishing the regulatory technical standards.
Maybe I can add on actually what Ian said on a positive surprise note. I was very happy to see indeed that the regulator did keep up with those regulatory technical standards being published, and indeed approached us in a very understanding manner to update where necessary policies and procedures. So I think that really showed that they have taken the commitment to work together with applicants, and it's not like applicants versus regulators, right, on the two sides of the ring. We really work together, and they also simply try to help us whenever there is something new published. They made sure that they bring it to our attention as well, so that we can proactively work together to update our framework where necessary.
Oh, that's really, really great news. And then they put the standard up high to the other authorities throughout the EU.
Definitely.
And you also mentioned that if we get back a little bit for the preparatory phase, that this was a very huge team effort. And when we were talking a little bit in the backstage, Ian, you mentioned that, well, this is not just about legal, which is very, very important, like the whole compliance. So can you please outline a little bit, like what kind of efforts should companies expect or count with?
Yeah, so I mean the relationship as I see it, with MiCA, with a business intending to submit their application as a CASP, they have to outline what are their regulated permissions. With MiCA, it's quite extensive. It's anything from custodial services, exchange services, advice services. Where legal really adds value is to really dive into both the text, what the text is actually saying and how it can be interpreted, and what the business is actually doing. And I think one of the advantages MoonPay has, we're not a centralized exchange. We could actually look into, we could start the question in a negative and say, okay, we don't do this, we don't do this, we don't do this. So what is it that we actually do? And communicating to that to the regulator is very important, that you have your interpretation down and that you fully understand what your business is doing in relation to MiCA. Going on from that, it then informs what articles of MiCA are applicable to you, and that's where the cross-functional exercise comes into play. So like a very basic example would be the MiCA's requirement to adhere to the travel rule. That's something completely different for most CASPs out there. So the legal text says you have to do it, then you have to do it. You have to then go to operations, inform them how that's going to change the onboarding flow, customer UX experience, which an enterprise team, an operations team, an engineering team will take will take very seriously. So you have to explain why the travel rule affects that flow. Then you have to work out how you're going to do that practically. Most CASPs in the business, they're going to reach out to a third-party provider. Again, that's going to take engineering work to integrate that solution both into your flow and into your back end. And then you have to work out with the compliance team or with the operations team who's actually going to sit over and monitor that. So as you can see, you go through each department as you understand more of how MiCA is going to impact your business, how your regulated permission is going to inform what you have to do and what impact that is. And it goes through and it goes across the business, and everyone essentially needs to be informed. Again, what we're doing and why we're doing it.
Thank you. And Marcus, who is in the middle of this journey at the moment, what's your take, or do you have any specific questions to Nelly and Dion which help you now?
Yeah, I have some, but first I'd like to talk about a lot of stuff. So first off, Ian mentioned the 18-month period for Denmark. Yes, it says 18 months, but there's an asterisk which says that if you haven't submitted your application before the implementation of MiCA, so before 1st of January, you would lose your grandfathering status. So that meant that all VASPs in Denmark had to submit their license application before New Year's in order to benefit from grandfathering. And then that grandfathering is up to 18 months while the application is being processed. So if you didn't submit your application before New Year's, there was 0 month, there was 0 grandfathering period. So that's one way for the Danish regulator to kind of weed out all the unserious people and only focus on the ones that actually want to have a MiCA license. Because I mean, we have jurisdictions like Czech Republic and Poland and stuff where they have thousands of VASPs, and they're just going to continue to run out the grandfathering period, even if they don't have any intention of applying for a KassaiLaw license. I think in terms of choosing a jurisdiction, which you've also covered a bit, I agree with Ian. Supervisory reputation is critical also for passporting. I know that you legally can passport everywhere, but there are jurisdictions with low repute supervisors that might have a harder time actually getting their licenses passported. Another thing that I think is important to look for, which is not really mentioned, is workload. I mean, so for instance, the Danish FSA, they have five people in their crypto office that is processing about 40 applications. And then you have a country like Czech Republic that has 400 applications, but I don't think that they are 50 people. There may be 10 or 20 people. So there's also a matter of they won't have the same amount of time per application, which means that they need to be more strict in just turning people away and say, okay, we're not going to spend time on that application because the quality is not good enough, so we're just going to tell them no. So that's something to look out for. In terms of our own process and surprises, I mean, for the first process, I was surprised how iterative it was. It's you send something in, you wait the 20 days for a PR license, it's a month, but you wait the 20 days, and then you hear back say, oh, we are missing this document. Okay, then you send in, you wait another 20 days, and then you receive back, oh, great, but now we're also missing this document. So it suddenly becomes very iterative. One of the reasons is, depending on the jurisdiction, is possibly that they are actually assessing the materiality of the documents as they go along. So it's a way for them to extend the 40-day period they have to do the materiality assessment of the full application. But sometimes it's also just a matter of prioritization and regulators being understaffed and those kind of things. So if you are in a jurisdiction where it's your responsibility to have the license approved before a certain date, you can't start 20 plus 45 days before that deadline, because you won't make it. You need to start at least 3 to 6 months before that deadline, because even if there is these reply deadlines for the regulators, it's very iterative how they do it, and the 20 days they restart, because if you send something in, they say, oh, that's not complete, you're missing this document, then the 20 days restart when you resubmit your application with the additional documents. So that's just something to be aware of if you're facing those deadlines.
And what type of questions you got from the authorities other than I'm missing this document? So Marcus, you can continue then. Yeah, you are in the flow.
Yeah. So for instance, Januar, what we are doing is, with our payment institution license, we are providing IBANs to crypto companies. So we provide operational accounts, IBANs, where crypto companies can receive customer pay-ins and can pay out salaries and rents and invoices and use it for operational accounts as well. And then on top of that, we have already built, with our current VASP status, we have built crypto custody and ramping on and off. And we had interpreted the regulations such that because we are the counterparty to all crypto conversions, that we would be executing doing conversions between crypto and fiat and crypto for customers. So we ticked off that box for the regulator, and we also, with the custody part, I specifically asked the regulator, okay, do we need the transaction part to begin with, or can customers send and receive crypto to and from their own wallet with us? And I was told that the transaction part was only for third-party transactions, and we had kind of de-scoped that to be travel rule compliant. So in our terms and conditions, it currently states that you can only send and receive funds to and from your own controlled wallets, because that exempt from travel rule when it's CASP to CASP. So we kind of de-scoped that from the license application, because our experience from PI license was also to aim small, because that makes it easier for the regulator to review and approve your license. Where if you tick off every single box to begin with, it's going to be a very big application, and the regulator will have a harder time, assessing it and reviewing it, and they might just turn it down. So that was kind of our decision of why we've ticked off custody, conversion, and that was it. And then the regulator came back to us and said, well, with your business model, we're not quite sure why you've ticked off the boxes you have. So we spoke with our external counsel that we use for crypto specialized questions, and they said that, well, they had some dialogue with the regulator through some other cases they had, where they came to the conclusion that it didn't matter if you were the counterparty or not for conversions. It wasn't what they cared about was whether or not you had your own order book. So if you were market making or those kind of things, then you would be executing transactions. But if you were straight through processing, even if you are the actual counterpart to the transaction, you would need execution of orders on behalf of customers. Even though we are not rerouting orders, we're executing an order with a customer, and then we are, doing a back-to-back transaction with our liquidity provider. But the regulator don't care about that because we don't have our own order book. And then they said, well, you should apply for the transaction services as well, even if you're not going to do third-party transactions to begin with, but then you have it and it's easier. And so we tick that off as well. So those were some of the things that they came back to us and talked about. Okay, are you sure that these check marks, do they really align with your business model? So that's just, great input to get at like the very first step of their assessment. So that was after the first 20 days. And then in addition to, and we're also missing these documents. So they were missing some, KYC documents for our board and those kind of stuff, which we've been told.
Is it because you haven't submitted or didn't submit those?
No,
or you submitted or it was not comprehensive?
Yeah, well, we didn't submit those KYC documents because there is a paragraph in the MiCA RTS application, or RTS on applications, where it states that if you already have a management and board that is approved through other financial licenses, you don't need to have those people reapproved. So I was kind of quoting that article, and then the regulator was like, yeah, but we would like to have it anyway.
Okay.
So I didn't need to resubmit the passports and all that stuff because those are the same documents. But the police attestations that they haven't done any crime, like I can't remember the name, straffeattest in Danish. So we had to resubmit those because we had submitted those for the people like 2 years ago when we applied for PI license, but they of course expired. So there is a regulatory requirement that they can be at most 3 months old. So we needed to resubmit those. So we've done that.
Thank you. It's very, very useful, I believe, to all the companies. And Ian and Nelly, what type of questions you got?
So with ZBD, I think we had less of a discussion on the qualification of services, although that's also happened and during the pre-scan process already back in February. So that was very helpful. I think where from directly the first sort of response, we saw that the regulator here is really deep diving into all the documentation that we have submitted. They also took a little bit of a staged approach, of course. It's a really big license application with a lot of supporting documents, so it is just not possible or not practical for them to review everything in the same time. But we really, from the first communication back, we started getting in-depth questions, more around the processes that we're intending to implement, also how those connect with each other. I think that was also more a positive surprise maybe that I had. The regulator wasn't really looking at the documents in isolation, in silos, each of them. They really were looking how they all connect, and this is, I think, very important for future applicants as well. Make sure you have consistent terminology, consistent processes, that they don't clash with each other. Because we did get questioned on where processes looked a little bit more isolated, for us to describe and actually really demonstrate how they fit together in the broader framework of the company and the business operations, to make sure that it not only ticks the box on paper of, okay, this sounds compliant, but is this feasible for you as a business to really implement and to really maintain on an ongoing basis?
Ian?
Firstly, I mean, I think to Marcus's point, that a massive +1 on the completeness assessment. I mean, I felt the regulator was quite thorough, comprehensive, and strict on that assessment. Not naturally, I think it's nothing for our listeners to worry about. They've been granted 20 days. They're going to make the most of it. That's just part of the application process. But I did feel that stage, in terms of questions, that stage of the assessment was very zero sum. It was either you're missing a document that we want, regardless of what MiCA say. If the regulator wants it, they've made the request, and we will provide it. And then the second part of that assessment was, we feel a document is too high level, go back and make it more detailed. So we got through that. The assessment was then complete within the 20 days officially. Going forward then, yes, we had to provide quite a heavy burden of onus on us to qualify what permissions we were seeking. So we had a very detailed business plan. We had to continually refresh that. Visual cues we found were very helpful, and then it was each stage of the application. We had to essentially qualify and rationalize all of our positions. So a CIRA risk assessment, very distinct to the Netherlands. The qualifications for our risk judgment were called into question. In addition, we provided extensive documentation on AML, as well as the travel rule. Again, these newer areas of the MiCA license, or the crypto, or within the crypto industry. I'm thinking the travel rule, ESG requirements in particular. The AFM was very interested on what our approach was. Our expectation there was that, being new themselves to these processes, I felt that they were looking answers from us to contrast to other applicants, and seeing what what a baseline sort of outcome would have been. So I find that quite interesting. Otherwise, we did receive quite extensive questioning on most areas for our business, but they were all reasonable. We responded to them. There was very few follow-ups. We went on to the next round. That's been our experience.
Thank you very much. So this seems like that the impression is pretty much that, but correct me if I'm wrong, of course, because I'm very interested in your take, that the authorities are basically like catching up with understanding the business, because all of us have spent enormous efforts in educating them. I believe we all can agree to that in the last couple of years. So what's your impression then? Do I understand it correctly? So that the regulators are actually starting to understand crypto business, or are there still gaps?
And I feel significant progress has been made on that front. We are going from an environment where crypto was unregulated and it was brought into AML regulation. I think that was the steepest learning curve, and it's been an iterative process of understanding and communication from that point on. For a business like ourselves, it's massively important, given the downstream consequences, that we are not compared to an exchange, because if a regulator goes into our application with that in mind, or that at their forefront, that we operate, with a hot wallet, that we hold custody, that a wallet could be spun up, anyone can deposit, withdraw, kind of scenario, the risk profile is completely different than what we deal with, and as such, the level of scrutiny and the pointedness of the questions is all different. So, from the outset, sort of a marquee banner on the business plan was, we are not a centralized exchange. Here's why we're not a centralized exchange. Here's what we actually do. Here's what we don't do. And this is why our risk profile is as such. And I think there has been a shift on when you've approached this in past instances. It's, why are you not a centralized exchange? Because I thought that's what crypto was. That was kind of the feeling we got. Now it's been, okay, please tell us more about this aspect of your business. Okay, where do the funds come from? Please trace out the funds flow. Where are the funds going to? How do you actually make money in your business? All those things. It just felt a lot more compartmentalized as they looked at each facet of the business. I didn't get the impression, that they understood us to be a centralized exchange or something mainstream, if I could call it that, like that. So, no, coming from a VASP environment where there was an application process to a CASP environment for MiCA, I can see the progress in real time.
Thank you, Nelly. Do you agree?
Absolutely. Very similar, I think, experience as ZBD also has a rather unique business model, because we enable micro rewards actually in Bitcoin within video games. So it's very different risk profile and very different transaction amounts, right? And funds flow from an exchange. So I think together with Ion as the first license applications, definitely made the regulator here quite an exciting first reviews. But I also think this is the reality, right? As we said, MiCA is new for us and it's new for them as well. They have been very open and collaborative to hear, to listen from us. Why do we think something should be a certain way? What are the assessments done in the background? What are the rationales? And what is the legal stance on those? And I think that is as much as we can ask from them, because that is, at the end of the day, it is their responsibility to check and make sure that we as the financial institutions are assessing everything correctly and in accordance with the law and with regulations. So there's not many examples, and they're also going through that learning curve together with us, basically, to see how MiCA applies to all of these business models. Some parts of MiCA are written rather rigid to tailor to exchanges specifically. So Ian probably had the same experience, that for us it wasn't always so easy to apply those provisions and those requirements to a business model that is just completely different and has a completely different risk profile, because at the end of the day you also want to have processes that are proportional to the risk profile of your business and that make sense for your customers, right? So that they still have a good customer experience and it's still possible for them to use your services. And to the extent, of course, that the AFM here has mandate, they really worked with us to work out how requirements really apply to our business model.
And it seems to be a very big emphasis on the business itself, right? So the fact that it's crypto, it's almost shifting to the secondary position, which Mia, you also mentioned once. And Marcus, you also got a question actually about crypto custody, but before that, do you agree? So what's your take with the Danish or authorities?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, they're really interested in this. One example is that when we had our first on-site visit from the regulator in May last year, there came 6 people, which is not normal for.
Wow.
So it was a bit daunting, but it was definitely a matter of them wanting to understand what we were doing, to better, not to scrutinize us specifically because we were crypto, but to learn about crypto. So we had our account representative, we had some graduate, we had the later established head of the crypto team, and we had the vice director of the entire fintech office who was there, and then 2 AML people as well. So it was definitely a learning experience for them as well, as it was for us. In terms of regulators' understanding, I think we need to be aware that they are human. They can only know what they know, and I have the impression that regulators know different things. So, for instance, the Danish regulator, they have done a lot of analysis on what it means to be truly decentralized, because they happen to have the founders of MiCA living in Denmark. So they have had to do that analysis to find out whether they had to be the ones supervising the MiCA or MiCA Foundation. And that also means that they've had some experts to help them kind of analyze and structure what it means to be truly decentralized. But we don't really have any big crypto exchanges in Denmark, so it's not my experience that they have a strong understanding on that part of crypto. On the other hand, I've heard really good things about the Austrian regulators, because they've had a history of supervising Bitpanda, so they know a lot about supervising a crypto exchange, but they might know less about other parts of crypto as well. So that's another thing that could be looked at when assessing which jurisdictions to establish.
It's very promising anyway, and I also agree. So that's our experiences as well, that you have to explain very, very detailed and very thorough, and in a way that everybody should actually come with follow-up questions, and so more like a business way, not necessarily a tech company way. We have so many other questions and topics to talk about, but unfortunately the time is getting closer when we have to end this conversation. So I have like 2.5 quick questions, but before that, Marcus, the question from the audience to you about crypto custody, that what do you use and how are the transactions authorized?
Yes, so we are using Fireblocks for our custody infrastructure, so that's safe. And then in terms of authorizing transactions, you do that either through our UI, our platform, or through our API. And then to add a level of security, we are enforcing whitelisting of addresses that you send to, with a 3-day cooldown as default, but that can be reduced to 1 hour through a manual process. So we ensure that it's not something that just happens.
Thank you. So one aspect which is always very, very interesting to all companies is the cost of this. So I have to ask you approximately, as a ballpark, what should companies be calculating, and whether there were some kind of unexpected costs on the go for you, which you actually didn't calculate with. So what kind of advice can you give there? I'm a company now, day one, I need a MiCA license, and up until I have that. And beyond, of course, because we could have a separate discussion about what comes after you have it. But yes, first the cost.
I think it's not possible in reality to give such a number. It depends too much. It varies too much depending on a company's current status. Is it regulated? So, for example, the way Januar is going now from a PSP to MiCA, this is very different situation than a VASP going to a MiCA license, or even a brand new startup, right? Starting to a MiCA license. So I think really the starting point is depending how extensive and how applicable the current policies framework of a company is, what kind of internal resources they already have available. Do they have people to begin with, legal and compliance, that can read the regulations at least and determine what is relevant for that company? Or do you only need to start that hiring process, right? Because these are very expertise and expert knowledge and skills required, which if you need to start hiring from scratch, if you don't have these teams established already, can be very expensive. So I think, unfortunately, it's really hard to say how much it costs to anyone, but MiCA and a CASP license is a very close equivalent license, for example, to an EMI license application. So I think companies should think around that and not underestimate, not think, oh, it's a few policies, a few processes that I need to put in place. There is impact on the whole business. So this is also, if you are an existing business, everybody will be a little bit taken away right from their day-to-day tasks. And that's also a cost that you need to account for, basically, for the time that people will need to dedicate in preparing documentation, but also answering regulators' questions and updating documentation throughout the licensing process. So rather than a single investment number, I think this is more important cost part that people need to prepare for, that everyone in the business needs to be engaged within the licensing process.
Thank you. Guys, someone?
Yeah, I completely agree. I would say it's more a recurring cost than a one-time cost to get a MiCA license, because you do become a financial entity or a financial institution. And that's one of the things that, I, as Chief Compliance Officer, have had to kind of, enforce throughout the company, is that the culture part, where, we have some employees who have a banking background, they are more used to it. And then we have some employees who have a tech background and a startup background and those kind of things. And it's important for me that everybody understands that we are not selling t-shirts on a website. I mean, we are handling other people's money. There's a certain set of risks associated with that. And there's a certain level of compliance and governance that needs to be implemented when doing so. And I could imagine that, we've been a PI for 2 years now. We're getting CASP. So that's not really a change. We've been doing it for 2 years. But still, I have to remind people, hey, remember, we are a financial institution. We need to do these things right. And I would imagine that change would be even bigger for a VASP, going from only having to comply with AML regulation to suddenly being a financial institution where it's the entire company that needs to do things right. It's not only AML, it's everybody. It's sales, it's tech that needs to comply with DORA in terms of IT security and those kind of things. We can't, when talking MiCA, we often forget to mention DORA. But DORA is just as big a beast to slay as MiCA is. So I think that's very important. And that was one of the costs that we've had. That was beefing up our entire IT governance to comply with DORA. Because we already had a lot in place, because there is a requirement to have IT security policies and governance in place to be a payment institution. But then DORA came, so it was a matter of beefing up Dora. If Dora hadn't come, we would have had all of those documents already. So that was one of the costs that we had, was that I had to hire a compliance manager to help me implement Dora in parallel with me writing our MiCA application.
Thank you. And when it comes to the costs, actually, we've seen and heard everything basically from the market, counting from offer you gave, it's too expensive because we just found someone that we can get a whole MiCA license for $3,000. It's like, oh wow, okay, up until to the fact that okay, you know what, because gonna use ChatGPT, it's gonna do everything really, really great. So we're gonna hire like a person who just got out of law school, and this is the MiCA licensing department, ChatGPT and one person. So what's your take? I need to ask this question because whenever I answer, whenever I engage into discussion about AI with companies, and I try to explain, but yeah, I know, amazing, but actually the legal hallucination rate of it's 60 to 80%. So you have to be like super careful. But what's your take, guys? Because I would really need some reinforcement, or please tell that I'm wrong, that I wouldn't want people or companies to be very cautious with AI. So can AI actually do a huge cost cut here?
I think that's a great question. Unfortunately, I also don't mean to burst people's bubbles, but I don't think you can save any costs with AI. It can be useful. We also try to use AI, obviously, to the extent that it helps. We want to embrace all new technologies and see how they can benefit all the different teams to streamline our operations and day-to-day activities. But yeah, we use AI as what I call sophisticated Google search. Basically, it can help you to search better and in a more complex way through documents, to find specific provisions, to do a bit of research for you and provide you the background sources. I don't know where it's going to go in the future, but at the moment we're, I think, really far from being able to use AI to replace people's works, especially when it comes to risk and compliance. There are so many variables there that we have not been able to see or even consider using AI to do any part of the actual job. Because especially when it comes to risk and compliance, just the broader implications on the business, even for us as humans, sometimes are not easy to ascertain and to really put on paper. AI certainly cannot do that for us. So you still need the experts in-house.
Thank you, Nelly. Highly appreciated that you agree. Sometimes I get bad conscious because people were so enthusiastic, and it's like, oh yeah, but maybe you should. Yeah. So guys, do you agree? We only have like 1 minute left. So like quickly, do you think I can solve this licensing?
Yeah, broadly agree. I mean, we're in fintech at the very least. It's crypto, highly innovative, tech focused. We should embrace the potential for AI and watch as it develops, for sure. But in our experience, I'll take it from a MiCA application standpoint. When you're dealing with regulators, as you look at regulation texts, positions, etc., it may seem like there's a lot of science involved, which there is, but there's also an art to it. How to respond to regulatory questions, how much information to give, when to provide it, when to say less, when to take an aggressive approach. There is a strategy involved. There is an understanding there almost of a human element. So what I say to the team is, when you're dealing with a regulator, it is science plus art. And I think it's that art piece that that AI cannot replace a person at this point in time, at least.
Okay. Thank you.
I would say I agree to the part that you need someone who knows what they're doing in compliance. But if you have that person in-house, AI can significantly speed up their processes, make them much more efficient. So one thing that I've been using AI a lot for our application is drafting policies, doing compliance assessments. So for all the policies that we already had because we were a PI, I could take that policy, throw it in ChatGPT. I could take all the requirements for, so say, the conflicts of interest. So there's a lot of, there's an entire RTS on things that needs to be in the conflict of interest policy. I threw that into ChatGPT. I threw our conflicts of interest policy into ChatGPT, and I had it review and say, okay, which requirements do we comply with in our current policy, and which requirements don't we comply with? And that's a task that would normally take a couple hours or something like that, and ChatGPT does that in 10 minutes, and then I know where are our gaps. So ChatGPT, at least the reasoning model, is really good for finding gaps, compliance gaps. And then, of course, you also need to know how to work with AI as well, because the ChatGPT, at least, which we use, have two different models. It has the LLM model, which is good for writing, and then it has the reasoning model, which is really good for tasks. And the reasoning model is really good for these like finding compliance gaps and structuring things and those kind of things, but it's not really good at writing. On the other hand, it doesn't hallucinate. So there, there's a balance between those two. And then also just, writing a policy from scratch. You can have ChatGPT, if you say, okay, these are the requirements, write me a policy. It will produce a document which on the surface looks good, but once you start actually reading it, it's pure garbage because it's so generic. It does comply with the regulatory requirements, but it's so generic that it's not usable, and you can't really implement it into the company. The regulator would never approve it in the materiality assessment of it. But if you combine that with something else that they do, which is that you can then have a meeting with one of your subject matter experts, say from tech, and then you have a meeting. You have the meeting service transcribe it, and then you put that entire transcription into ChatGPT as well. Say, okay, please update the policy to now include all the information on how we do this within the company. Then you get something that is really close to being usable, and then you just have to go in and edit it and review it, and that's at least for me, because I have a finance math background, I'm not a lawyer by education. So for me to go down with a white page, white document and write a policy, that's something that takes a long time for me. But to go through a document that is already written and review and update and change things that I think sound stupid to something that's good, that's a much smoother process for me. And AI is really good for creating that initial draft.
Thank you, guys. And it was a really, really great pleasure to talk to you. And before, I think the last message before we say goodbye should be one last advice, because we talked in the backstage about a lot of things companies still think about themselves as 10 companies, but they are not 10 companies, they are established financial services now. Or we were also talking about that the website should be aligned, because it's a very low-hanging fruit that the authority is gonna check the website right away whether you updated it after you got the license. So there are several more practicalities, as we said, we could talk for hours and hours, but one last advice to companies was to the licensing process as a takeaway. We can go from then, Ian.
My advice would be communication. I think a central thread throughout our discussion has been cross-departmental engagement, making sure everyone's on the same playing field, that everyone understands, again, what we're doing and why we're doing it to comply with MiCA, what's going to be the benefit. I think talking talking internally as much as you can, because there's so much of it. I think it's a matter of repeating yourself over and over again until people finally get the message. Again, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Application, like we said before, it's one day good time feeling. Then you have to move into operationalizing it. The only way you're going to get that done is if you get people on board. So talk to as many people within your business as you can on what you're doing and why you're doing it, and repeat yourself over and over again until someone listens.
Thank you. Nelly?
Nice. Yeah, I think what Jan said is very important, and maybe building on that, not just communication with teams, but when you are designing the processes and how you will comply with requirements, part of the license application, think a little bit ahead in the future as well. I really urge companies to not feel too tempted to really just try to tick the box and put processes there which comply with the requirements, because indeed then starts the harder part of actually implementing and maintaining those processes. And obviously, as companies grow, some of their processes will also change and evolve. But for the most part, it's really important to make sure that it is sustainable, right? For the next 6 months, for the next year, 3 years, that company can also exist and the business can continue with all of the requirements and processes promised during the licensing process, implemented and running effectively, because this is a bigger part than doing the licensing. So don't get too tempted to finish it quickly, to just promise how you will comply with things. It's better to take a little bit more time.
Thank you. And Marcus, last but not least.
Yeah, no, I agree with Truth. So I would build on that and say you need someone internally who's full-time, who owns the entire application process. You can't just buy, an application from a lawyer because they won't be able to do all of that communication that Ian is talking about, and they won't be able to do the follow-up implementation that Nelly is talking about. You need someone internally to run that process and own that entire application, and then they can get help from lawyers whenever it makes sense, but you can't outsource the entire application process to a lawyer.
Thank you very much for your time and a lot of great insights. And maybe we should do a follow-up once about life after the license, right? Because it feels like you all have a lot of insights there and stories to tell and discuss. But so far, thank you very much for the MiCA in action. So the takeaways from your licensing process, and big congratulations that you've done it. Try to remember a little bit of that happy day, because it's still there. So it's a great success, and everybody is looking at you, I believe. Definitely from Europe, but maybe from all over the world who are interested in this. So thank you again for being the early birds and for being here and sharing everything with us. And take care and have a nice day ahead.
Thank you.
Thanks all. Bye.